A friendly reminder that in 3 generations, everyone who knew us will be dead, including the people whose opinions stopped you from doing what you wanted all along. Imagine that someone you know achieves every dream and hits every goal they have. Years later, they get old and die. 2 years after that, how much do you care? About as much as everyone else will if you accomplish your goals and dreams. Do it for you.
So I think about death all the time because it's probably the central theme. It's probably the thing that I think the most about, and I think that influences how I see time and also how I think how it influences agency. Like what actions I'm willing to take despite the judgment of others. And so a lot of times, and it might be because I have more insecurity than everyone, that I think like, man, I want to do this thing. And then I hear all these other voices of reasons why I shouldn't do it, or why somebody else will say like, that's bad, or you're bad, or like, that's wrong, whatever. And so I think I've had to come up with a lot of these devices to get around my own insecurities, to take action despite those insecurities. And the biggest one that I think about is that it doesn't matter whether I achieve all of my goals or I don't achieve all of the goals. In 3 generations, I'll be forgotten, and the only people who were naysaying against me will also be dead. And so then it's like, just do it for me. And then when I wake up every day, there's only one voice I have to listen to.
But that means that you need to be able to work out what to do from first principles. You now no longer have societal norms or assistants or role models or archetypes or expectations, and that's also difficult in a different way.
I think that the more you flex whatever that muscle is of like independent thinking, the more it becomes the default way that you think, and then everyone else's action is just start looking more and more insane to you.
What's an example of that you can think of?
I mean, shoot. Just the most basic ones of like living the life that you don't want, not wearing what you want to wear, not dating who you want to date, not living where you want to live. Like you're living at home and you want to move and your parents say no and you don't make the move, or you're dating a girl because she's socially accepted, by your friend group, she's safe, but like there's always some distance in between you, but you're like, I don't want to risk it, right? Or like you're in the job and every day you go there and you're like, I mean, it's okay. And the idea of just living an okay life just sounds so terrifying to me that the freedom to fail over and over again is still more fulfilling to me. At least it feels like it's real than walking through kind of on autopilot. And so I think that's a lot of the choices that other people make that seem insane to me now, but didn't seem insane to me a decade ago. You know what I mean? I think it's just like as you practice taking more agency, taking more responsibility for the decisions, then you just get better and better at it. And then it just seems more and more ridiculous. They're like, I just can't quit my job. And you're like, why? Like, no, physically, why? Like, why can't you quit your job? Like, you know what I mean? They start hyperventilating and it's like, could you move in with your parents? Could you move in with a friend? Could you split rent? I mean, I could, but I mean, other people who are going to die in 100 years would think what? And one of my favorite ones is, and I say this all the time to Layla, like whenever we're getting to some sort of like mini complaint, it's like, if you zoom out far enough, you can't see the earth. So we're talking about like, oh man, they're going to mess up this order on this vendor's, blah, blah, blah. I was like, if you zoom out far enough, you can't see the earth. It's just like, it just puts everything immediately into perspective of how ridiculous some of the things that we're concerned about are.
Sean Puri's got this thing where he says, don't follow what most people do because you don't want the results that most people get. The average person is obese, likely to be divorced, and has less than 1K in the bank. It feels safe to do what everyone else is doing, but it's actually a terrible decision.
It's like the best way to guarantee to not have the life that you want is to do what everyone else is doing. Unless you want what everyone else has, which no one does.
Yeah, it's being able to think for yourself and treating it like a muscle, I think, is a smart way to consider it, because in the beginning it's really, really hard. Totally. You've been resting on societal norms and the way you've dealt with past trauma and your parents' expectations and what all of your friends do and what's accepted and all of this stuff for so long that when it first comes to you needing to step on that muscle, it's like trying to move your ears. Like all humans have got muscles that can move their ears, but because no one works it as a child, they just atrophy away. And this is the ear muscle of personal growth.
I think I had a lot of practice with it because so a lot of people have many voices that they hear that they feel are judging them, right? They have their friends, they have their uncle, they have their siblings, they have their cousins, coworkers, whatever. I think I had just one voice that I heard really loudly. And I was talking to one of our employees the other day, and I was trying to put it in perspective, a younger guy. And I was like, imagine how much you care about your mother's opinion and your father's opinion and and all of those other people. I was like, and now imagine that there's literally only one, because I had no siblings. I basically had no mother. I had just a father. And so like his approval was literally everything. And he disapproved of the path that I wanted to take in my life. And so I think a lot of these mental faculties or these little frameworks or these isms just came from like, how can I combat this incredibly booming voice in the background? Because like when I look at what I was doing at the time, like I was a consultant, I graduated in 3 years, I took the consulting job, I did all the things. But the craziest thing was that the moment that my father was most proud of me and he approved of my life the most was when I was the saddest. And so that's when I was like, maybe his approval isn't the right way to feel good about life. And so that started basically the 6-month journey from when I decided that I wanted to change my life till when I changed it. And I think that like as you become more able or more potent or higher agency, that timeline between when you decide you want to do something and when you actually do it just continues to compress, right? Like now if I want to change something, I'm like, let's change it, like done. We walk out of a thing, I was like, we're never going to do that podcast again, or I don't want to talk to this person again, or whatever it is, right? Whereas before it's like, okay, I have to sleep on it, I have to really think about it, and like, how am I going to, it's like, why do I care about how I'm going to say it? This is what it is, done. And it's just like, and that timeline is compressed, but the hardest one for me, like the first one was by far the hardest. And everyone since then, the nice thing is that no matter how difficult your circumstance is, if you have, like the bigger the wall that you have to get through is, as soon as you get past that one big wall, you then can use that wall as the evidence for why you can jump over the next wall, because that will be the biggest one. And so like, after I did quit my job and left my house and left Baltimore and didn't tell my dad until I was across the country because I was so afraid, like people think of me as like some big alpha, whatever. I was like, I was so afraid of my father's disapproval that I didn't tell him until I physically left the state. Like I'm not like, think about that. Like I wasn't even just one state over, I was like 5 states over. And then I was like, hey, by the way, I'm going to California. And he was like, well, let's come over, we'll talk about it. And I was like, I'm in Ohio.
Already here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Already.
And then then obviously he had a different reaction, right? But then after that, it was like, what do I have to do now? It's like, oh, I gotta sell strangers. And I was like, I told my dad I didn't want to do what he wanted. How hard could this be? And so like it then becomes this one huge proof point. So the bigger the dragon is that you have to slay, the more evidence you have that you can slay the next dragon. And I think that is, if there's ever been a good point for why getting over the first hard one is so hard, is that it will then give you the reinforcement that you can do whatever you need to do next.
Yeah, the life you want is on the other side of a few hard conversations, and you're living a life you hate because you're too afraid to have them.
I think about that a lot, because like whenever I feel anxious or insecure or angry or sad, I'm like, what conversation do I need to have that I'm not having? And so then, and usually if I just think for not that long, I'm like, this is the conversation I've been putting off. And then, I'm not the poster child of mental health. And so I'll just call myself a pansy for not having the conversation. And then I just have it. And so again, I think it's like, I need to have this conversation, and the time between when I have it versus or when I know I need to have it, when I actually have it, just continues to compress. And if you've ever had like a breakup or an employee firing, or a quitting if you're an employee, like these things that you dread, I don't know if you notice it, but like the day you do it, the moment after you do it, I'm like, how many other conversations can I have? Like, I want to be like, I'm like, who else do I need to talk to? Yeah, totally. Because
become a serial killer for awkward conversations.
So like the next series of hard conversations that I had after I left home was actually like years later. So I had multiple partners I had a partner in one of my gyms. I had a partner in 4 other gyms. I had a partner in a chiro and dental marketing agency, and all of them relied on me to make money. And so all of their livelihoods were still dependent on me, but I was splitting everything, and it was horrible for me at the time. And so I remember when I ended up getting in a DUI, and I talked to a performance coach or whatever, and he was like, your stress and these conversations could literally kill you. He's like, they almost did. So I got in a head-on collision at 60 miles an hour and I walked away, no injuries. But it was like my wake-up call, but not to stop drinking. It was my wake-up call that I needed to have these conversations. And that's what I was avoiding when I was drinking. It wasn't the alcohol. It was what were the things that I'm avoiding, that I'm using alcohol to get away from. And so the next day, I had the first conversation with the first partner, and it was horrible. But the moment I was done, I was like, I got to call the other guy. And I called the other one. I was like, this is how it is. And the thing is I had this backstop of my death of like, you almost just died because you wouldn't have this conversation. And so then it just gave me this courage to just be like, and whatever the reaction was, I was like, I'd rather be alive. Like, that was it. And so it's weird though, because death has been this really recurring theme in my life that like, the same thing happened when I was like the only thing that gave me enough balls to stand up to my dad, to be fair, from a distance from the car when I was driving halfway across the country. Like, let's not make me into too big of a hero here. Was the idea that like I started thinking like every day, I was like, I hope I don't wake up. You know what I mean? And that was the thing where I was like, this is a big enough problem that like if you don't want to wake up, then
what have you got to lose?
Exactly.